Sometimes people say that in the absence of religion, there can be no moral values. And in fact, for that reason, there can never be values that everyone agrees upon. We are inherently conflictual. The human condition is conflict among peoples because they can just never agree on values. Well, putting the lie to that are developments like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 and the Millennium Development Goals, where the nations of the world agreed on a number of milestones that humanity should strive for, having to do with health and longevity and education, and some of which were met years early, such as reduction of extreme poverty, usually defined as more or less what a person would need to support himself and his family, which was met several years ahead of schedule. Right now, the less than 10% of the world lives in a state of extreme poverty, and the successor to the Millennium Development Goals, called the Sustainable Development Goals, calls for the elimination of extreme poverty by the 2030s. An astonishing goal, one that is by no means out of reach. One development that people both on the left and the right are unaware of is that there's almost an inexorable force that leads affluent societies to devote increasing amounts of their wealth to social spending, to redistribution, to children, to education, to health care, to support of the poor, to support of the aged. So until the 20th century, most societies devoted at most 1.5% of their GDP to social spending, and generally much less than that. But starting in the 30s with the New Deal in the United States and accelerating in Europe after World War II with the welfare state, now the median across societies of social spending is 22% of GDP. The United States is a little bit below that, but even that's misleading because we've got a lot of welfare that's done by our employers. That's how we get our health insurance, that's how we get our retirement. Other countries, it's the government that mediates that. But if you add the private social spending onto the public portion, the United States is actually second highest in the entire world. But this is a development sometimes called Wagner's law, and it just seems that resistance is futile. Even conservative politicians like George W. Bush presided over another expansion of the welfare state for this Medicare drug benefit. And the attempts by the Trump administration to repeal Obamacare, for example, were stymied by almost like pitchfork and torch-bearing angry constituents. People like social spending, despite their protestations, even in libertarian America. And in fact, it's probably not a coincidence that the number of libertarian paradises in the world, that is, developed states with no substantial social spending, is zero. And as developing countries develop, as they start to become affluent, they get on the bandwagon and they start to develop programs of social spending. The expansion of social spending shouldn't be a shock because even if one believes in the principles of the free market, then they're just some things that the market is not going to provide by design. No one expects that the market will provide for poor children. It's just not something that markets can do. Or the elderly or the unlucky. People with nothing to offer in the marketplace in exchange for which they could make a decent living. And so as a kind of necessary patch or kludge, or as we say, safety net, wealthy societies have to provide what the market by design cannot.